studio with me is Marcus Harcus. Marcus Harcus heads the Minnesota campaign for full legalization. The website is www.legalizeitminnesota or mn.com. Legalizeitmn.com. And he'll give you his phone number and email addresses later on. He wants to remind you, and he'll have a chance to talk about it. Cannabis Lobby Day is coming up February 12th at the Capitol from 10 o'clock to noon, and it's at the room 316. We'll talk about that as well. Also here with me in studio is Dashita Dawson. The bio I'm reading says Dashita Dawson is the weed head. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Let me turn your microphone on. Hold on. I think our mics are all live now. Dashita, welcome here, first of all. Dashita, I'm presenting you as a global cannabis advocate, an award-winning executive strategist and author. That's my telephone. I'll turn it off here. A second. Okay, great. And as medicine for mainstream market adoption. She is the founder, CEO, and president of MJM Strategy. It's a digital-focused strategy and management consulting firm in the cannabis industry. She's the author of a book. The book is How to Succeed in the Green Rush. It's a top-selling workbook for entrepreneurs, contractors, and professionals looking to transition their skills into the legal cannabis industry. She's worked from at Target, right? And her note says from Target to THC.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. She's got 15 plus years of business development, strategic management, and digital marketing excellence while leading teams for United Way, Target, and Victoria's Secret. She has an MBA from Rutgers Business School, and she completed her undergraduate degree in molecular biology at Princeton University.
Yeah.
Holy Moses.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Let me turn this camera over your way, and then I'll start my live feed as well. Talk about the proposition. Why are we having this discussion, first of all? And what discussion do we need to have about legalizing marijuana, cannabis?
Wow. Before we jump in, I'll say first and foremost, thank you so much for having me again. It's so exciting to finally meet Marcus. I think a lot of the cannabis community, I got to shout out the digital space because that's how we know each other, right? We follow each other's posts and our ability to survive the space. Survive it. I gotta start with that joke, but I've been a fan, and as a person who spent almost 4 years in Minnesota, I was a little disappointed with the medical marijuana rollout, and so I've always kind of leveraged Minnesota, unfortunately, as a benchmark for what not to do, right? In terms of just the limited licensing in the vertical model, the limitation of flower, lack of diversity, just all of the things that we're seeing. And but there was an extremity here, and as a result, the market didn't do well. But it doesn't mean that the community still don't need the medicine, and it doesn't mean that there isn't health and wellness benefit. I've been leveraging my degree and my background in science to better tell that story, to rebrand, because I think that that's the challenge. That's the first hurdle. But then I don't think people of color realize that there's that social justice and restorative justice component. More than half of the drug arrests in this country are due to marijuana arrests, and we are a disproportionate amount in terms of who gets arrested, and it's state to state. Minnesota is no different. And so I think that there's even that element as well. And so the last piece and sort of the icing on the cake is that there's generational wealth that can be achieved if you do enter the industry well, and understand what's happening. Like, it's not like a get rich quick scheme. It is something that actually is going to transform the way I think our country lives and the way we do business. So at any rate, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to hear from Marcus about what's going on in Minnesota. I know some bills, multiple, right? Yeah. have been brought to the table. And so, that's one of the things I do as a consultant is come right in, and I want to support the state. I support municipalities, leaders in already on the ground with trying to devise the strategy for getting it done. Currently doing a lot of work in New York, right? Everybody's watching a lot of work in New Jersey, but I can't forget the time I spent here.
So who are your customers? Who are your clients as a consultant?
Primarily now, the last 18 months, it's been municipalities, special interest groups, nonprofit organizations.
So a city calls you to say that we're looking at the impact or considering medical marijuana or legalization of recreational marijuana. Then why do they call you, first of all? And what do you tell them, secondly?
They call me because what I've shown over the last almost 3 years is that I have a strong business acumen, but it's really grounded in an understanding being from East New York, Brooklyn, where the war on drugs was big time happening while I was growing up, understanding what needs to happen with that tax revenue. A lot of markets haven't figured out how to get rid of the underground or the illicit market. They don't really understand the economic dynamics there. And I do using my MBA, but I also understand consumer marketing through Target, Victoria's Secret. I've sold to America. And this is one of those things that we're going to have to rebrand, sort of like natural hair. I worked in that space. Women of color, primarily almost over 80% were permanent hair before the space transformed. That has completely shifted. And it was based on a perception shift and what was beautiful, education on how to take care of it. And we're going to have to do a lot of that same thing, change perception, re-educate related to cannabis.
Let me bring Marcus Harkis in. Marcus, slide your chair around, first of all, because I want to use this camera. So, oops. I just one camera and I'll pick another one up. But thank you. Thank you, Marcus, for being here.
Shout out
Thank
to
you. I
David
never thought I'd be on the McFarlane show.
Yes.
Haven't you been on before? You haven't been on before?
I don't think so.
Well, maybe not.
I've been
Okay.
a fan for years.
Well, it's just a question of time, and now's the time. So thank you for what you do, because I know that you are earnest, sincere, focused, and committed to education and to information, to destroying ignorance in this space, because you know, and you, I think, reveal how impacted in a negative way our community has been, but that negativity also impedes development for all human beings. Absolutely. And so I think you've got a big picture and a specific picture about how we need to understand, address, consider, and reason about what we do in the cannabis space. Let's first of all give your background. How did you come to getting in this work?
So I've been an organizer pretty much since I was in high school, but professionally since 2003. And I worked on a wide variety of issues: housing policy, education policy, hiring, through state contracting, youth development, community development. And I never thought that this was an issue to work on until Colorado and Washington State legalized it. But I had been a consumer now for 20 years. So I kept that a secret, and I just went about my life trying to avoid getting caught up with the law, because as Black men, we're preyed upon often by the law enforcement. But when Colorado and Washington State legalized it, it turned on the light, like, we shouldn't have to creep around here, because I'm not a criminal, but growing up in North Minneapolis, we're treated as criminals so often, even if we're not, just for being Black. And so I started smoking cannabis when I was 20, kind of to deal with the trauma of dealing with excessive racial profiling and police brutality, and also seeing like school to prison pipeline throughout my Minneapolis public school career. So when I found out that this is a thing to work on, I started to learn how bad prohibition was. And then I also started to realize how many lies we've been fed from the drug war. And I realized that legalizing cannabis is the beginning of the end of the drug war. And then I also learned about all the other imperatives, including the economic development. And when I learned that, Black people in Minnesota, there's 8 Black people for every 1 white person that's arrested, even though it's 85% white, 5% Black, and there's equal usage rates, I knew that this is not a minor issue, Yeah.
it's a big deal
Yeah.
and big consequences, and we're on the short end of the stick.
Right.
I always say that in Minnesota, and probably this applies to much of the country until we wake up, when it comes to problem arenas, right? Um, we get the misery, they get the money.
Hmm.
And so they portray or cast a situation or an activity or a space as a problem in search of a solution. And
Right.
they present that solutions are forthcoming. But in reality, there's an effort to manage the problem so that it means perpetual income for them. And so we continue in our role as products from slavery now to consumers, but we continue in a role of permanent disadvantage and of permanent being a permanent wellspring or source for somebody else's wealth creation. So the question becomes, as the nation tries to reorganize its policy about marijuana use, and even looks at things like opioids, et cetera, there's a shift in awareness and in attitude. The shift is to brand these issues as health issues now rather than criminal issues. Before, when they could say that marijuana consumption, opioid use was an illicit black thing, right? The answer was war on crime,
Hmm.
war on black people, lock them up. But that became a good business for white folks.
That's so true.
And so you are turning it upside down and you're saying, you know what, you can't keep making money on us. Now you've changed, you've elevated your consciousness to the degree that you're not going to brand this so much as criminal, and you're looking at it more properly as health and eventually recreational. And how do we make sure that we're not continually locked out of the business and the development opportunity there? So that's what I want you guys both to discuss and to address. Am I right in my analysis? First of all, Marcus, what do you think? Am I
You're
off?
spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing
You're
that
right.
a lot of people don't understand is cannabis is illegal because of for-profit policing. I mean, and if you look at the entire history of prohibition, it's a very racist policy.
Mhm.
So yeah, full legalization is the only solution. But I have to say, I'm a fan of you.
Oh, thank you.
So
Thank you.
I'm honored to be in your space. I could just sit here and listen to you.
No. I mean, I think we don't know that the history has been a lot of propaganda, right? I don't fault. I grew up in the church. I don't fault folks for not wanting to, deal with it initially. I didn't leverage marijuana or cannabis until I was an adult. I stayed away from it because I was an athlete. I was an A student, and everybody that I knew that was involved was getting in trouble. They were getting arrested. I watched a young boy that happened to him, and right in front of me, and that changed my whole thing about police, about just drugs in general. But at the same time, you want to know the truth? My mom consumed my